everybody, and welcome to another DotP Roundtable. I'm Cyphus. I'm sitting here with the Flubb with two B's.
Hey, how's it going?
And, of course, Ursinity. He's everybody's favorite something podcaster, but I don't know what.
Boy, the amount of effort you put into that intro is staggering.
I just, I'm getting to the point where I'm thinking, I gotta come up with a new gag for Ursi, because I was already ripping off your gag, and two,
You'd be surprised. Honestly, that might be one of the hardest parts of the Thursday show now, is like every week I have to think of a new random topic, and Proud has to say okay. So most of the time I just don't tell him, especially if it's a really dumb one, because I know he'd veto it. But like some weeks I'm like, man, I have like I remember I posted on Twitter my list, and there's like a dozen things on my initial list that like I'm never gonna do because it's just dumb. Like ghost hunting. I was gonna be a Belgian history podcast one week, like random stuff like that.
Speaking of obscure history, I finally got around to listening to hardcore history. I had heard snippets with other people, and you've brought it up a half dozen times, and I'm familiar with it and always have been, but I just never dedicated to one of those episodes, and I finally sat down and listened to that Prophets of Doom about the Munster, Germany Anabaptists.
Mm-hmm.
Man, now I'm hooked. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Moving right into the next one.
By far the best one is, or in my opinion, granted I'm biased because I love World War One, but the World War One podcast that he does, it's like, I don't actually think it's not done yet. It's like 6 or 7 parts. I've listened to it like 2 times. I listened to it when I was writing my thesis. It helped a lot. Like that's probably my favorite one of his. I've been working through the one he has on Rome too. But yeah, I cannot recommend hardcore history enough. That's what, if I could be a quarter of the podcaster Dan Carlin is, like, my life would be complete.
And just his ability to carry a show solo, I'm enthralled all the way through. It's better than an audiobook. It's better than a history lecture. Anyway, I couldn't recommend that highly enough, even just after like really finally truly delving into just one episode. But you're in for a long haul. You got to be somebody who really likes the longer shows, and I mean longer shows.
Just listen to him on like 1.25 or 1.5 times speed. Like he speaks pretty slowly normally too. Like that's how I've consumed them. And yeah, I can definitely, like, I've taken, using the World War One podcast series as an example, I've taken an entire semester long, like 3,000 level, class on World War One specifically, and his podcast was honestly more educational than that entire college course that I paid thousands of dollars to take. So, like, trust me when I say, even if you have to pay for some of the ones that are not on his free rotation, if you have any passing interest in history, Dan Carlin is the bomb.
Yeah. So enough about advertising other podcasters. And speaking of college, I hope you boys took a stats class, because that's what we're going to talk about today. This topic idea struck me last week when I realized, man, I spend a lot more time as I'm like really seriously trying to climb in Dota. And I've been trying to stick to the, just a game in ranked. Warm up before I go into it, really adhering to the Ursi method, not the Flubb method. I'm sorry, Flubb.
Yep.
And I've seen some decent climb. I think I'm as of this podcast, I'm at like 2196 or something, which isn't, it's not huge, but I've been climbing pretty steadily. I'd say 25 points every other day for a couple of weeks. So it's working. What I've been doing is I've been going in and looking at like the meta trends. On Dotabuff, you can hover over that Heroes tab and click that Meta tab, and you can see basically the skill brackets, the under 2K, the 2 to 3K, and so on. And I've been trying to go through, and it's what sparked, on Monday we talked about Ursa. I've been trying to go through and learn the cores that have the highest win rates in that particular skill bracket in the 2 to 3K. And then I started wondering, is that even worth my time? You know what I mean? Like, is there an element of me and my play style that might suggest that maybe that's not the most efficient way to go about gaining MMR and climbing? maybe I should be focusing instead on my personal stats and looking at the heroes that I personally have a high win rate with, as opposed to the heroes that have an overall meta high win rate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah, Flubb, you can go.
Well, the thing is like it makes sense. It's both like something that I would applaud and say like you should kind of do something a little bit differently. Where like you want to do what's if something is good in a meta, there's a reason why it has like a very high win rate. Certain skills will be a little bit stronger than others. Certain things will be a little bit lessened on like dealing with a certain idea. Sometimes, for instance, like Spirit Breaker gets like pretty crazy because you get to the point where Spirit Breaker charges in and like people just don't remember how to deal with that. And if you don't remember how to deal with the like Spirit Breaker charging, then like it'll be strong for a while, and it's good to know that at the time and understand those curves, and understand why it makes that hero so strong in that potential bracket. But the thing is like you also want to like know you shouldn't like always be trying to do what is popular right now, because it will eventually switch. And there is like they have a system for Dota 2 on making the really overpowered heroes. They will lessen them over time. I mean, look at Oracle. Oracle was a very crazy hero to begin with. And it was good to understand that hero, but it's not as big a deal if you know how to play that hero now. And they're always going to like change it slightly as time goes on. Other things like Mirana, Mirana's still like, she's not as crazy, but the availability of that hero still with like now with Warlock and that type of meta is still a vibrant thing, and having her. So like some dividends pay out just like you would with stocks. But I never tell people to depend on something like that, because you need to prepare for your own game. And if the meta does change for you, then you'll get the biggest result when it does change. And as long as you're playing safe and you're playing your general heroes that aren't like low at the list, like you're not playing like Bristleback right now, then it's fine. Like if you have that like 50% win rate, you're gonna like stay where you generally are. And then when the meta really goes for your favor, you're gonna see a giant bump in your MMR because you play well. It's just you're playing this hero that may not be the best right now.
Rest in peace, Lena. Yeah, I mean, I more or less agree with Flubb, though. When I think of like the meta trends and all that kind of stuff, and looking at that, I think it's a really good place to start from, but it's not a place to end at, if that makes sense, right? So it's important if you're saying like, all right, you think about you specifically. If you're going from being a support player to being a carry player, going past like what you may just see in your pubs, if you just go to Dotabuff and just see like, all right, what are the highest win rate carries in my skill bracket pubs? And then you say, all right, well, it's, Juggernaut, Anti-Mage, and Naga Siren. Then that's a good jumping off point to say like, all right, I should probably learn one of these heroes or two of these heroes. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you should follow that religiously, but it's a really good point to see that like, it takes 5 seconds to go to, like you said, Dotabuff, heroes, meta, and then you click like, oh, okay, I'm in sub 2K and win percentage. The lowest win percentage carry is Ember Spirit in the and which is incredibly surprising. But then probably don't pick Ember Spirit, or like if you're setting out to learn a new role or what have you, don't pick the ones that are obviously losing in your bracket. So that being said, obviously that's not like don't hold yourself to that exactly, right? Like if you already play Ember Spirit, then that's fine, whatever. But, like I said, it's a good starting off point for everything, but it's not like the end all be all that you should only be picking the top 5. But it definitely has an impact. Like me switching roles to mid over the last, whatever it is, month, I went to Dotabuff and I said, and also I watched a lot of pro games and stuff. And I said, all right, what mids are being played? What mids are not being played? And then I went out and I said, all right, I don't play Mirana. I'm going to learn Mirana. I play Invoker. I'm going to keep playing him because he's a comfort hero. That was especially like early on in my transition. So it's all stuff to keep in mind. So I think, yeah.
Let me ask this question. How have you guys used stats in your play as higher skill players? How do you interact with sites like Dotabuff and DotDota and OpenDota?
It gives me a way to complain about heroes that have high win rates and validate my opinions on what is or is not OP. That's primarily that.
It's the reason why me and Ursi fight, It's like Ursi argues something's OP, and then I'm like, no, it's not too bad, man. He's like, look at these stats, man. This is why I'm complaining. And I'm like, I have to like kind of agree, but like it's not that bad for me. And then we just like sit there and argue back and forth like a bitter like a bitter friendship.
Couple.
You spend like 7 hours every Sunday playing together, and these things happen.
Fair enough. So you, I mean, you've never utilized, those meta trends or stats based off of heroes to maybe see where the meta might be shifting.
Oh yeah, I mean that's definitely. I think I when I'm looking for meta shifts, that's mostly either in the beginning of patches or in the pro scene. So like recently there's been a lot of Warlock play, obviously, but that, the hero wasn't big in the beginning of this patch and then only started being big later in this patch because of, some Reddit threads and a lot of pro play. So I think when you're looking for late in the game meta shifts, I tend to look towards pro games. But overall, I mean, if you're a pub player, like pub trends are what's important, especially early on in patches when things are a lot more volatile. But even now, like the meta, even though it's changed, like gradually over the course of whatever it is, 180 days of this patch, it's still, more or less similar at the top, right? Still a lot of Drow Ranger, still a lot of Pudge, Underlord's still good, especially in higher tiers of play where he's picked more, the things don't change drastically in pubs. Omni Knight is still great, even though, he went from a 60% plus win rate to a 58. Like, gee, what an awful hero now, guys. So I think that's important. I don't use the trends overall, like the statistical trends on Dotabuff that we see nearly as much as I use individual hero trends. So if I'm playing Mirana and I can go to her page and see, all right, well, 70% of players are buying Ags, or it should be like 100%. But, 100% of players buying Ags, then like, okay, well, maybe next time I play Mirana, I should buy Ags, using like the most easy, obvious example.
Yeah.
So if you're seeing, Silver Edge is getting picked up on Juggernaut in, 40% of games and it has an 80% win rate. Like, oh, okay, I should work that into my build. Or at least like understand and go into those games and say, all right, why did he build Silver Edge this game? And why did this same player not build Silver Edge the next game, right? Like that's the really valuable stuff on a specific hero basis.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Like Ursi does something that's really useful, and it's something that I use the system a little bit differently. Like I say I would use that, but I don't follow Ursi's idea strategy for that as much. Now he does get a lot more out of that, and he's able to transition metas quicker than I would because he has that ability to look through the stats, understand them quicker, and just like field that information. Where for me, I'm more of like a visual learner and kind of like understand whatever is happening within the meta. Just because like I have to like experience something. So a lot of times I like pull on my own experience for things that I've done or drafting or just general knowledge. So I like to watch pro games, but I like to watch pro games and understand like why that hero is popular. I will actually go into the game, not use Twitch, not use anything else, and like go their perspective and see, okay, are they leveling up this ability first? Are they doing that first, this first? And you can do that all within a like statistic based lineup. But if you can like truly see where they're moving on the map and understand like why they're moving in that pattern, that can also help you to understand like why they're really working within the meta. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't see whenever they look at pros. They look at their items, they look at their the way that they're like building their character, but they don't look at the movements. They don't understand like why they're stacking at this point. They don't understand why they have to get a like the common thing for like everyone that everyone knows now is that you need to at level 10 whenever you're playing Warlock, you need to get the experience tome to him and get a smoke on him so that you can get an easy gank with your drop, with your rock drop, and then push a tower. And it's like, it's general knowledge at this point, but someone has to make that idea. And a lot of times you can't generally see that from like statistical data. So like that's when going into the actual environment, going into the game and understanding it can help you get to a better point quicker.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, would you say that paying attention to statistics is something that, I mean, maybe we should even be avoiding at lower skill levels? Or, I mean, is it a good idea to keep an eye on those things?
You go first.
They're always important, right? Like it's never going to be a bad thing for you to look at hero win rates or popular builds or whatever. I would say it's less important at. I was gonna say it's less important at like lower MMRs where the meta is less rigid, but at the same time you're less punished. So and like, yeah, I don't want to say there's any skill bracket that it is more important or less important, but it is important to varying degrees, and you're going to be punished differently. So like my example would be like I love Lena, and she is arguably one of the like bottom. I would say she's definitely in the bottom 20 heroes this patch, and arguably like bottom 10. Like even though the meta has changed since TI, she was one of the few heroes never picked the TI, and I make her work in some games, even though she's noticeably weak. And even like Chessie, who is like what 7? I forget what his MMR, but he's like in the 7K bracket, and he went on like a 13-game winning streak with Lena mid, and that was interesting. And and you can kind of in these higher skill brackets see that like people just have that base of experience. Like, oh well, I've just played a couple hundred Lena games, so even though the hero is weak, I can still make it work. So non-meta, like the meta is less important in that bracket. But similarly, if you pick Lena in the 2K bracket, well, people are going to punish the fact that she's a weak hero less. So it's less important to be abiding by that meta game, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there are exceptions to the rule, but in general, you're never going to be hurt. You're never going to be hurt by just looking at the numbers. Although it may, although it is, it'll help you make decisions, but it's not the end all be all, like I was saying earlier. That's for sure.
And Flubb, thoughts?
I think that people use it as a crutch, and it should never be used as a crutch. Like, they look at stats more than they do their actual own gameplay and how the game works in general. And that's like the biggest problem with Dota players that, get to the game and they're like, okay, the stats have to work this particular way. I'm reading it how it is. And it's like, yes, on average, this is what's generally happening within the game. And it's good to know that for sure. But they don't pull on their own experience enough sometimes. And then there's the complete opposite of that, where like people like just don't pay attention to stats at all and then just get like absolutely massacred. And they're like, well, this worked the other game. And it's like, well, you built a BKB versus like every right clicker in the game, and none of them have a stun or a slow. So yeah, that's why you lost there. And they don't like understand like the true design of what the game is. Whereas like, someone with stats, they'll generally like try to see that it's just don't ever be the extreme. It's like the golden mean rule from, what is it? I want to say Socrates. But anyway, you look at it, you always want to stay at the best of both worlds. Use everything to your advantage, and don't always focus on one style. The whole idea of strategy is understanding a little bit of everything that is available to you, and then making a decision based on all of that information. And people get too caught up in one style most of the time, I feel like, whether it be stats or in-game or whatever is available to you. And they just like will only focus on that one style.
Well, also, I mean, I feel like we have to kind of contextualize this conversation by stating the fact that we're in like arguably the most balanced patch, where stats are potentially the least important in this patch of any patch, right? So this patch, although we do have outliers like Omni Knight that are like 58% win rate, in previous patches there are heroes that are far weaker than the middle of the pack and or far stronger than the middle of the pack. So if we think back to like 6.83, you would be completely idiotic to not look at statistics and see, oh, hey, Troll and Sniper have a significantly higher win rate than, I don't even remember what the bottom tier carries were back then. But, that's those kind of patches, or like looking at OD win rates in 6.8, whatever it was, 5.
Yeah.
That's when it's doubly important compared to now, where it's like, more or less everything can work, kind of, sort of. So stats aren't super important. So this conversation has to be kind of colored by the patch.
So I mean, so let's say I'm a casual player, right? I'm under 3,500 MMR, and I'm ready to go into ranked, or I just barely got into ranked, and I've calibrated somewhere on that, somewhere on that scale from 1 to 3,500, and I want to climb, and I want to guide which heroes I'm about to learn, right? Because that's really what I've done, and to personalize it is I thought, okay, I want to play carry. I feel like after looking at my gameplay and contemplating, taking a step back and contemplating these games, that I want to be able to impact the game from a carry position in this particular skill bracket. So I'm going to learn carry. I'm going to learn some new heroes in that capacity. Am I wrong to let stats guide me towards a particular hero to learn, or is there something should I be looking more at my own gameplay and trying to decide like which heroes will I see the best impact with, or which heroes will fit my playstyle best?
I mean, I would just go in and just say, all right, you can go again to Dotabuff Heroes meta, and you can sort by like safe lane, mid lane, off lane, etc. And just go to your bracket, let's say 2K, 3K for the sake of this example, and then just click, win percentage, and look at that and say, all right, the top is Luna, Wraith King, Sven, Ursa, Drow Ranger, Silencer, Spectre. Okay, so then look down that list and say, all right, I've never played Spectre. I've never played Drow Ranger. I really like Wraith King, and I really like Sven. Okay, well, you've made an educated point of data, at least, for you to now go on and say, all right, if I'm going to learn a hero of the ones I really like, X has the highest win rate, and Z has the lowest win rate. So I'm probably not going to practice Z. I'm going to go and practice X. So, I mean, that's the most basic way I'd do it.
So, Flubb, anything you want to add on that before we move on to my next question?
Well, personally, what I would do, I mean, you're also trying to gain MMR, so learning something new and gaining MMR is kind of hard to do at the same time. And I always try to advise people to do what they think feels right. But personally, for myself, patches always change, things always change, metas always change. So if you are getting into a new position like you are, Cyphus, then I would look at the game and I would say, okay, well, out of all the heroes that I know right now, I need to see where all my liars are and kind of go from there. But if you were brand new to the position and you knew none of the carries, let's say, and you were to go on to Dotabuff and use the statistics thing like Ursi's saying, I completely agree with him to a point on the idea of you want to get some high heroes under your repertoire and get 3 of them. Get 3 of the higher skill ones, the ones that are not higher skill, but the higher win rate ones. And then I personally would go to not the low win rates. You don't want to learn something that's currently underpowered because you're going to lose more often. But go for the middle of the road guys. Go for the guys that are the 50 to the 55% win rate, learn 2 of them. And hopefully the next time that the patch changes, maybe you'll still stay with 2 guys that are current, that are okay, because they're probably not going to nerf them at that point. If anything, they're going to buff them up. And they're either going to stay about where they are or they're going to get better. And if you take all 5 of the heroes, the only ones that are all the top skill, they could all get nerfed, and they could all get nerfed into a point that you're uncomfortable with. And it's important to know it's not only important to be good with the heroes and give yourself the best option, like if something is really good, it's also good to know heroes and to know when you're exactly even in a game. Like when your hero has like no true advantage over someone else and you can outplay that person, you're going to be able to be better than your skill bracket. And now the thing is I wouldn't play those two heroes that are like 50 to 55 win rate until you're like very comfortable with them and you've played, maybe at least 10 matches on unranked, but I would still at least make an effort to understand things that are not the highest.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you bring up advantage and or having an advantage. And one of the other stats that I think a lot of players, especially in my skill bracket, and hell, we used to make a game of trying to pick hero counters, right? And this concept of a hero counter, and I know just from doing the show with you guys, I think I kind of know your general stance, which is it's best to kind of think about heroes that counter other heroes through experience. But a lot of us are terrible at doing that, and I admit that I still find myself every once in a while when I'm trying to figure out what the hell I want to pick, hitting up a heroes page in particular. And I've definitely shied away from the old Dota picker, I will say, because it's led me astray too many times. But I will, for instance, so I pull up Ursa here because this was actually one where I lost a game on Ursa, but did decently. But I found myself wondering, I wonder if I went into that match with a statistical disadvantage versus any of their heroes. And by the same note, I had played a game before that, both normal games, where I'd won, had done really well, went like 16-5, had a great fucking time, was having that stereotypical Dota player thought where it's like, I'm just going to play every game of Ursa. And of course, I realized, I was playing against a Legion commander and a Pudge and a Juggernaut. And in that particular, when I go and I pull up Ursa's page, I can see that the heroes that he's best versus, or at least for the last week, according to old Dotabuff, Juggernaut's number 2, Legion commander is like number 6, Pudge is number 4. Those are the heroes that, statistically speaking, according to Dotabuff, he's better than. On the flip side, he's worse versus, they mentioned PL and Broodmother and Windranger and Slardar. How much credence should we, as lower skilled players, lend to stats like that?
So I think I've brought this up on Twitter before, but I have like a very inherent dislike of the term, like of people saying like in our skill bracket, in our, as though you're playing a different game, right? Because like good habits and good ideas are applicable in every skill bracket, right? And if you're winning 25 points at 2100, that's the same as winning 25 points at 4100. And I feel as though a lot of people have bad habits and make bad plays and stuff and excuse that by saying like, oh well, like I'm in a lower skill bracket or I'm in a higher skill bracket, so it's not like, so it's fine. Like there's like I feel like it sets you up for failure to just be like, oh well, I'm only playing in blank bracket. Okay, so sure. I just want to bring that up because I don't know if that's a divisive opinion, but I feel like I hear that all the time, and it's mostly from people that like are stymieing their own growth by just saying like, oh well, I can pick suboptimal things because it's 3K and people aren't going to punish me, or I can do X and I guess can do bad things and get away with it because my opponents are worse, or
the reason I say at our skill levels, because I do think that's something that's more prevalent. I do think you can find trends that are prevalent at certain skill levels. For instance, you talk about behaviors. I do think you can probably identify bad behaviors that are more common in different skill brackets, right?
Oh yeah.
And on the flip side, I do think that there are things kind of outside the game that probably follow, similar types of patterns. For instance, it's other low skill players. Myself, Roland has done this in the past. I know, other people that we've played with who have done this in the past. Did use things like Dota Picker. I can't even remember what the old one was that we used to go to. And then as we got more into, the stats and not to discount those other methods, but the more legit stats is how I'm going to phrase it, of places like Dotabuff and Dota. I've started to go to those hero pages and look at these trends of advantage, versus disadvantage. And I do think that impacting our decision to maybe play a hero or be willing to play a hero in a particular circumstance probably occurs more in our skill bracket than it does at a higher skill bracket, right? Like I doubt that you Ursi or you Flubb or Proud or some of the other high skill .p folks. I doubt you guys are going to Dotabuff in the middle of a match or at the start of a match and clicking on a particular hero and saying, "Oh, this hero's best against that hero," statistically.
I do it. I do it very regularly, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to hear.
Like almost every time I play a hero, especially in captain's mode where I have like 10 minutes, but even in solo queue, I just go to a page and I say, all right, today I'm going to play Ursa this game, and I click it up. I'm like, all right, right now the most popular ability build is EWEWER. Like, you notice that because that's most popular, and then see, all right, what is the trending item? Like, oh boy, people are building Shadowblade a lot nowadays. Like that's valuable regardless of your skill bracket. And yeah, you may have, like, there are so many heroes in the game, it's so easy to forget. And like, I mean, maybe this is just me and not you, Flubb, but very regularly there are obvious counters to heroes that I just forget about. Like in the moment, it's like, all right, we're at pick screen and they have Storm Spirit, and for some reason in my brain I'm not thinking of Anti-Mage, and I'm like, I'll just pick Sven. And then it's like, then you look at your screen again, you're like, oh my god, Anti-Mage is in the pool still. And so that's where looking at stuff like Dotabuff, that Dota doesn't exist anymore. There's Noxel was tweeting there's going to be a new one coming out in the near future that he's been working on. But it's important, honestly. Like, there's so many heroes in the game, it's so easy to forget and be like, oh boy. Like me and Prout, we talking about we fifth picked Wraith King in I think it was a Hakuna Marana game, and we talked about it on the Thursday show. We were like, all right, all the counters are out of the game, and then we just forgot that PL was a hero because he's low pick rate and he kind of sucks in most games, and he actually suffers from the same thing as Wraith King, ironically. But we just forgot about the hero, right? And one of us should have looked at Dotabuff, and if you look at Dotabuff, you're right away going to see, oh hey, PL is really good against Wraith King, and Wraith King really sucks against PL. So right. I would not say that is not valuable. I would say probably you might be right. People do it less, but I would say it's still super valuable. Yeah. I just like the wording of like in my bracket, it feels very like self-limiting, and I hear that primarily. And you're not this way, but I hear that primarily for people that are excusing their own like suboptimal play and like stymieing their own growth.
Oh, I'll excuse my own suboptimal play with the best of them. Don't worry about that. It's always somebody else's fault, just so you know.
I used to do that too. That's another reason why I bring this up. And that, like, this is not like me sitting on a pedestal and being like, oh, yada yada yada. But like, even in present day, like if I lose a mid matchup, I'll look at the other person and be like, oh, he's 6K. Like, of course I was going to lose that matchup. Or like, oh, I was playing Jug versus Tinker and I lost the matchup. And it would have been very easy for me to just be like, oh, that's just a bad matchup. But when you actually look it up, like, it's a good matchup for Jug. I just suck. Right. So, we all have that kind of thing where you want to excuse your things by being like, oh, well, they were just better than me. Or, oh, well, I'm just not that good. Or I'm just like a 3K player and I got put up against a 4, like, it's very self-defeating prophecy-esque if you're saying like, oh, in my skill bracket, whatever.
This is the biggest point that me and Ursi have. I hate when people say, oh, they were higher than me, I lost because of this. And like sometimes I'll catch myself doing it still, and like I piss myself off pretty much when that happens. But like I very rarely ever say like this person is higher than me. I don't think that you should ever say this person's higher than me, I lost because of this reason. It's like there's always something more that you can do with Dota, and like I'm not trying to like once again, same as Ursi. I'm not trying to like throw on the burn Cyphus fire for saying something like this.
I will gladly be the Jesus who takes the takes on all of the anger and hate for all the low skill players out there.
But no, like the thing is like don't ever put yourself down. Like try to stay positive and go from there. Now the point of like looking stuff up and saying that like we don't like maybe you don't do that. I have to admit, I really don't do that. It may be a weakness in my play, but personally for myself, it's kind of something I always have an extra hero page because like I've generally whenever I would get bored in like class, whenever like growing up or still like I'm still in class now, I'm still in college. There's times like whenever I'm on break and I don't have like no one in my class that I really want to talk to or anything, or in general, there's like times where I would like sit around at like a doctor's office or something. I would always have my phone out and I would just have the hero screen up on my phone. So I would just look over heroes and I would it was almost like a quiz to myself. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but I would like go through and I'd be like, okay, yeah, this guy, if I was to pick this guy, what would I need to look out for? And then I would just like go down the list and be like, okay, so if I have Earthshaker, I need to guarantee that I don't go versus a clock. I don't go versus a silencer. I don't go versus like these certain things that I would like get like cross off the list, and I would just constantly do that over and over and over. And it seems meticulous, but it was like kind of fun for me because I was like always trying to like best myself. And then if I ever had a game where I had that reaction, like we did the other week where we forgot PL, then like I put that game to memory, and I will not forget about that probably for like 3 years now, because it's something that like for me personally, that's like the biggest thing about Dota is like picking in general. Like I love being in that situation of picking, counter picking. Like that's like 60% of the game for me. So for myself, like it's kind of like the greatest puzzle that you could ever solve, and I always want to solve it. And I should probably use all the tools to my advantage, like I was saying before, but for some reason I don't in that scenario.
So yeah, but it sounds like
memorized.
It sounds like everybody would kind of be in agreement that yeah, it's a good thing to. I mean, hell, a good thing for everybody to be doing, just to at the very least maybe remind you of that hero that you shouldn't be picking the hero you want to play into, or maybe reminding you of the hero that you love to play that would be super sweet in this particular instance.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. I'll be honest, I was kind of expecting maybe an opposite response from you guys, but that actually that's very, very awesome to hear.
As long as you're being intelligent about what you're wanting to try, Cyphus, like as long as you're truly thinking it out, there's never going to be a wrong answer in Dota, and how you're getting information, how you're doing things. It's when you like get stubborn and don't you realize change. That's when your strategies fall apart, and when you're not willing to take advantage of what's available, like I did there, like I just don't take advantage of that. But also at the same time, I also surround myself with people like Ursi, like Proud, who do that. So I have certain attributes that help that out, and then they have certain attributes that help out a different area. So if you don't have something that you could do, you can always work on it, but also try to surround yourself with people who are different minded so that you have everything worked out for yourself.
Yeah, fair enough. I apologize to everybody who's listening, because we have the guy apparently who lives behind the studio has decided to use a jackhammer tonight or something. So we're picking up some weird background noise. But Ursi, so you brought up what I wanted to hit on next with regards to statistics on Dotabuff, in particular, and that was the most used items this week stat. Now I know, just from experience playing with all of you guys, talking about it with other statisticians. I mean, we've had a lot of folks from Standard Deviants on the show along the way, and the people that have made us think differently about these item win rates. By which I mean, you can look at, for instance, I still have Ursa pulled up, But Ursas who build Boots of Travel and who get to Boots of Travel win 75.92% of the time. That obviously is an indicator that those are games that went late where they were already wrecking and they had the extra gold to, pick up a pair of Boots of Travel. So maybe those aren't the best statistics. Or you look at like Ursas who build Abyssal Blade. Usually you're ending the game before that. But if it's going super late and you've got the gold to build an Abyssal Blade, well, it turns out you win about 72% of the time. But how should we be looking at other items, and what are maybe some of the pitfalls that we should watch out for whenever we're trying to use those statistics to our advantage?
So right off the bat, I'd say win rate is by far the least important thing on the page for most used items. It is pretty pointless, honestly. Like you said, Boots of Travel, 75.92% win rate on Ursa. Like, that is not a relevant number.
I should rush
right?
BOTs on Ursa.
Exactly. Like, you don't want to have that flawed way of thinking, right? Because, when you think about it, like you said, like, you only buy BOTs on Ursa super late game. He's also a hero that is a low priority hero to carry a TP on late game because he does not like somebody split pushing, he doesn't deal with it well because he doesn't have AoE wave clear. So he is not one of these characters that either is going to build BOTs early or is going to suffer if he doesn't have a TP scroll in the late game. So, there's a lot of factors going to win rate that are irrelevant. Like, even to go to the extreme, right? Like Coddle has like a 100% win rate with Mask of Madness. It's not because, or like, you can arbitrarily inflate win rate, like, just for the fun of it. Like, there was one guy, this has happened multiple times, but people just always buy like the same recipe for the same item whenever they win a game on X hero. So certain heroes have like a 100% win rate with like a Mask of Madness recipe or whatever. Like, it's just, that's an example. Obviously, like, nobody's like, oh boy, let's buy a Mask of Madness recipe. But so win rate's not terribly important. The only important thing when I look at most used items is you look at the top few, and if they're picked at like twice the rate of the fourth one or the fifth one, let's say, depending on the hero, because some heroes have more core items than others. That's like, those are the standouts where it's like, all right, if I'm playing Ursa, Phase Boots, and Blink Dagger, I should have that every game, right? Because if you look at those, their little red bars are doubly high than everything. Vladimir's is also up there. Honestly, I kind of disagree with that. I think Mask of Madness is better most of the time, but that's a sidebar. But so I would look to, I feel like I'm going to fall back on my earlier explanation with like hero choices, is that you should educate yourself and think through these things and look up heroes, but not live by it, right? You shouldn't say, I'm playing Ursa, so I'm going to buy the 6 most bought items, because then you would end up with Phase Boots, Vlad's, Blink Dagger, BKB, Abyssal, and a Skull Basher. And that's not a great item set. So educate yourself and see like, okay, which items are situational, and then think through like, okay, Shadowblade is built, it's the 7th most built item on Ursa, right? So you should now think like, okay, this is a viable item. When are people buying this? Okay, I'm going to build a Shadowblade when either they have blink canceling abilities, which now that Zeus is nerfed, it's less applicable, but you might say, all right, Shadowblade's popular, and one of the big reasons to buy it is if they have a split pusher that does not carry vision like an Ember Spirit, and I could easily burst down, but he's too evasive and his reaction speed would be too fast if I blinked on him. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to build a Shadowblade. It's important to have these things in your frame of reference when you are building your hero, without necessarily saying, like I said earlier, just buy the top 6 items. So it's a case of educate yourself using these stats, but don't rely solely on them. And I use them primarily just to look at standout items, and then the next dozen items are solid situational picks. Because similarly to how we were talking about, it's easy to forget counters or easy to forget heroes. It's also pretty easy to forget items, and like just say like, oh well, I haven't built a Mjolnir on Alk in a while, but it's really good this game. It's very easy to forget and just be like, oh well, my regular Alk build is Armlet, Radiance, Manta, Octarine, Abyssal, right? So keep these things in your mind, but don't live by them, solely.
Flubb, thoughts on items or how you interact with items? With stats?
using that stat system like kills innovation. That is, I don't like that at all.
I hate you so much.
Right back at you, Ursi. No,
God.
like using stats on items. God, that sucks so much. Like, understand what the item does. Like, understand why you're picking up a BKB. Like I was making the point earlier. Understand why you're picking up an urn on someone. Do you need the health regen? Do you need the dot damage to counter one of their abilities on your hero? Because your hero has no way to take care of it, and you have no one that can get mech, but you can't really get mech on your hero either. There's like so many different like little intricacies within the game, and I feel like items, like people like will see certain item sets, and like that's like the biggest problem I have with people a lot of times is like they expect to go certain item sets or certain builds, and that's not generally the way that I feel like the game runs. The game runs around the idea of what you can possibly have set up for your team, or what you can have set up for your hero. Yes, it's good to maybe understand what is the popular build for a hero, because it's probably like successful and that's the way that like they are designed around for their team. So like if someone's expecting you to be like the tanky hero in that situation, then yeah, it's good to know that. But besides like you have to go a certain way to make something work, no, never.
Okay, so my counterpoint to this is that innovation is for when you've already mastered or at least become very experienced on a hero and you know like the hero through and through. So let me bring up an example from recently. I love Anti-Mage. He is my boy. He is my dear child, and I'm a big fan. And everybody knows on Anti-Mage, right? If you go to his page right now, which I'm not going to do because you'll hear me typing, you'll see Battle Fury at the top of the list, Butterfly, Abyssal, Manta, BOTs, Moonshard, whatever. And that is a hero with a very linear skill build. And you can innovate past that. Like I've been talking about practicing Anti-Mage mid, which is going to have to necessitate a different build. And that is going to be innovative. Innovative? I don't know the proper pronunciation.
I like innovative.
But yeah, but I'm only innovating because I've already played, whatever it is, 100 games on the hero and play him a lot. And if you're learning a hero, or even if you're like moderately decent at a hero, you shouldn't be innovating. Innovating is for people that are, even if you can innovate at any skill bracket too. I don't want to make this sound like you should only be innovating if you're like 9K. But if you could be like a 1500 MMR player, but if you've played 150 games of Ursa, that is just as valuable as a 5K player that's played 150 games of Ursa and then is going to be innovating, after the first 50. So if you are trying to innovate and you've only played like a dozen games and you're saying, I'm going to start going Blink, Dagon, Stand King, don't. Innovation is the way that people lose games. Like, to get back to my thing about Anti-Mage, earlier this week, I played an unranked game. I think I was with Fafnir. I forget who it was. No, I was with Proud. We were practicing something. And our Anti-Mage went safe lane. He went Aki, Vanguard, Echo Saber, Lincoln's, finished Abyssal, and then went in for Manta. And then the game was over and we lost because obviously. And that guy was trying to innovate. He was like, I'm going to make a fighting Anti-Mage build because Echo Saber is a good item. And I'm going to put a bunch of points in Mana Break early. And I'm going to be unkillable because I have Aki Vanguard. And I'm going to hit people with freaking Echo Saber. And obviously he was garbage and he did nothing. And that guy, now I wish I had pulled this up to go to his profile. I'm sure that guy does not have 100 games of Anti-Mage. I'm sure he is playing that hero for the 5th time. And he's like, oh, I saw this guy do this once, so let me try it. Like, maybe, honestly, that I thought it was pretty cool in like the sense that if you were a good Anti-Mage player and you were doing like a mid Anti-Mage build, like it gave me some ideas. I probably wouldn't do that, but innovating is for people that have played a lot of games. It's not about skill bracket. It's about time played on the hero and mastery. So that's why, Flubb, you innovate too much, and it bothers me.
Okay. All right. Well, I would say that, like, all right, that's fine. That I personally don't think I innovate too much, whatever. But
I think you do, buddy. I think you do.
Okay. All right. Who do I innovate
support
on?
sniper.
That's
support
too crazy.
sniper for the win.
Support sniper.
Support sniper is legitimate. Whatever.
But that's
I played that hero
innovation.
so much.
Exactly. But you're qualified to innovate on support sniper because you've played so much sniper, and like you can make that work, right? But like if you're looking at Dotabuff and you're going to the most used items things, you're probably not somebody that has played, 50 games of sniper. And it's still educational even if you have, right? You might see something you didn't know. Like Silver Edge, that's the real standout this patch. Although to be fair, I've noticed more of the Silver Edge trend in games than I have looking at stats. So that's a valuable that's an important point of reference, is like seeing things work in games versus seeing things in a numbers chart. I definitely give you credit for that one. But God, innovation. What a thing.
It's how the world goes around, man. That's how this game is designed. It always should be about innovation and getting yourself like understanding why certain things work that way. But to go along with what you're saying, obviously that wouldn't work. Like you're going down something that gives you a bunch of mana regen, which he doesn't really need that much mana regen. He could use a little bit, but the reason why you're getting the axe, or God, I can't think of the
Echo
name
Saber.
right now. No, Echo Saber is like a weak version of I want to say Ruined Axe because I'm Han trash a little bit, but what's the name? Battle Fury. There we go.
Battle Fury, yeah.
Battle Fury. It's like a poor man's Battle Fury, but like it's not about.
They accomplish completely different things. I get where you're trying to go with this. Okay, but it's not like a poor man's something. Like a poor man's shield is like a bad version of Vanguard, right? Because they do the same thing, just one's worse. But Echo Saber is a fighting item, and Battle Fury is a farming item. So
exactly.
One's not
poor, that's why that's a horrible idea.
All right,
that's
all right.
a horrible idea.
I'm moving on because I want to hit one more thing before we kill the show here.
All right.
Okay.
We'll have that last minute of wrap up. Don't you worry. So we'll flip a coin for who gets to go first. So the last thing I want to ask you guys is so now considering all of these these overarching stats that we talked about, the win rates by skill bracket, the looking at individual heroes and their best versus worst versus the items that they're building, how do you use your own personal stats? What do because I obviously you could look at it and be like, hey, that's for bragging rights because I got a 60% win rate on, fill in the blank on the hero here. And I for a long time, like I was looking at, which faction I was better with, because I had a 55% win rate. I still have a 55% win rate when I'm on Radiant versus Dire. What stats do you look at when you're looking at your own stats to help improve your play, or what are you usually paying attention to? What do you think is important on those personal stats?
I mean, I usually just pay attention. Like I try to think of things immediately post game and think like, all right, or even post death, and think like, all right, I just died. Like we were doing an Invoker game in practice yesterday, because we're recording this on Monday. And we do Sunday Hook and Round practice, which is streamed on DotP TV. Well, I had 2 deaths on Invoker that was totally unnecessary and not throwy, but actively bad. And right after those deaths, I thought about that and was like, all right, I probably shouldn't have been pushing the tier 2 when everybody was missing, even though my team was fighting was pushing the other tier 2, whatever. So I like to think of that, and that's not a statistical thing. That's just a when I'm assessing my own play, I try to do it in game and immediately post game. But I do use the Dotabuff, and I suppose this is less like a numerical thing, but I will look at trends over, I'll look up a hero and look at, all right, in Tinker, in the last 3 months, I've played him X amount of times. And if you just look down the list, you'll see right, I was winning more often when I was doing Aetherlens Ags builds than I was when I was doing Dagon E-Blade builds, for instance. And so you should use that kind of stuff. And it obviously, the less games you have on a hero, the less valuable your data is, right? Just because there's less. God, now I wish I had actually ever taken a stats class, but I never take math.
There's a lower sample size, a small sample size to extract data from.
Right. So if you, over the course of the last month, played 1,000 games of Lone Druid, that's a great sample size, right? And you can say, all right, I won 70% of the time, and of those 70% of games that I won, 50% of them were with my good build, 25% were with a different build, and 25% were with a third build. Then you can logically say, all right, I should be doing this 50% of build. Or then you can go further and look, all right, in the 25% of games where I did a different build, why did I do that? And it can help reinforce things. But honestly, it's not. I would say that I don't look at my personal stats that much because like I just internalize things, right? And like I don't have a large enough sample size because I don't spam a hero. But you know, it's valuable. I would say look at it. But you know, it's not honestly. I don't feel like this is the most valuable thing. I feel like you should be feeling things out, like trending wise in your own games. Like your own games are, you know, you're in all of them, right? Like you can figure out what's going wrong and what's going right, even over the course of time. Like I was trying out a new Lena build, and I don't need to go to my page and say, "Oh, look, I lost a few games." I can just say, "All right, I lost every game, not every game, but I lost a lot of games where I tried this new build that's like phase, drums, Yules. Like that build clearly was not working for me. Like, but you know, I was in all those games. I can internalize that information. I don't need to go back to my Dotabuff and look."
Sure. Flubb, thoughts on personal stats? How do you interact with them?
Well, kind of I don't know if it's like my best kept secret or not, but I feel like when I first started playing and when I was like looking at information for Dota and for Han and things like that, I would always look over that to try to figure out who I was as a player. Like everyone knows that I'm a very highly aggressive support player, and I've been that way for a while. When I was bouncing in between a lot of different stuff in the very beginning, the first few years, I was kind of all over the place. But you can kind of look at my stats, at my statistical data of like each hero, and you can notice each hero is still a very aggressive play. Like even like the ones that are the ones about holding back and not being aggressive and like trying to like level up over time and then get to like a good point like in the late game, like carries. Unless that it is an aggressive type carry or it can be like played in a different type position, I am complete garbage on that hero. And like it's funny, like you can look at my statistical data and like figure that out, and it's hard sometimes to look at that at a purely removed point in your ability. But it kind of reminds you of who you are and what you need to work on if you take the statistical data at that value. Now, I didn't really have the amazingness that is like Yasp or Dotabuff in general. But if you take the idea of what you have now, and all new players and all players of a current ranking, if you don't know who you really are, what you're really best at, you can kind of infer and like go down the list and be like, okay, what is this person's attribute? Is this hero a safe, like a saving support, or is it an aggressive support? Is it an aggressive like lane dominance mid? Is this a pusher? Is this a, just figure it out and then like see what your win percentage is. Maybe see like how you play that hero. Maybe putting it into a certain position is bad, because like now they have like safe laning and off lane and roaming and all that jazz on there, so that you can look up that. And I feel like once you've figured yourself out, it's not as important, but it's still good for the new players.
Yeah. So and this is where I have to admit again that really what I'm doing with this show is just abusing it so that I can get better at Dota. And I'll say, so what even brought all this to my mind was I found myself going to the meta trends and, like I said, running through, learning the heroes that were ranked highest and were filling that carry role. I had my criteria that I was going to be a carry or that I wanted to pick up being a carry. I started going that direction, and then I started going back and because I put a lot of games on Phantom Assassin, I put a lot of games on Spectre, I put a lot of games on Medusa, Jug was probably the only other carry I'd really put any kind of time into before that. Maybe Bloodseeker. I know I ran Bloodseeker much to Roland's chagrin when he was super popular. So I at least had an understanding of the mechanics behind him. And then I went and I put a good streak of games on Animage. And but as I kept going through this, I found myself going, man, I keep learning these new ones, and yes, I am doing this primarily to climb, right? I'm a Dota player with, I'm embarrassed by a small MMR, all right? I don't want to, I have MMR envy, So I went back and I looked and I was like, well, okay, I've got 26 games played in the last 3 months on Phantom Assassin, 26 games in the last 3 months played on Spectre, and the win rate on Phantom Assassin is 69%, and the win rate on Spectre is 65%. And I started asking myself, should I just be playing those heroes? You know what I mean? Is maybe what I should be doing is focusing on heroes that I'm seeing myself have that success with, instead of switching through each carry, going down that list that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
See, what I will really quick, I want to go first on this one.
Yeah.
See, that was my point. Was like I want to advise people against only playing those two heroes, because you're picking those heroes in really smart ways right now, and that's probably why you're winning a lot with those heroes. And like, maybe you are more of a carry player by looking at those statistics and understanding who you are better as a player. Maybe you can see, okay, my win rate is really good on carries. Maybe I've always been a carry player and I've only been playing support because, I just wanted to be nice to my friends, or I just wanted to not deal with things in a pub. But now that I have certain skills to like get around that, or I know that I can farm better than most people around my level, then I generally win more often than even if I don't get the help, because I can do better even if I don't get the help than they can with my help. And I mean, that's what you have to balance. And if you look at those stats and you're like determined that you're winning more often there, then that's good. But if you look at the stats and you say, oh, I'm winning a bunch as Spectre, winning a bunch as PA, and then you only start playing those heroes, you're going to be picking them up as like first round picks, because why not? And then they're going to counter the hell out of you. And then your win rate's going to drop because you're going to be countered like almost every game. You'll try to work around it. And if you're really, really good at the heroes, then you still may be able to get past it. But I seriously doubt it. It's going to hurt you somehow.
Yeah. Especially if you're trying to climb, like, if there is value, and this is an argument a lot of people that advocate for hero spamming say, is that if you really want to learn and improve with a hero, play against its counters. So, for instance, I've been working my Tinker, and my Tinker's, I'm pretty confident in it, but obviously it needs work. And so I picked it the other day against the Spirit Breaker. And I didn't pick it against Spirit Breaker, but I picked it, and logically they were going to pick Spirit Breaker because obviously. And I was fine with that, right? Because it was practicing, it was a learning experience. But I did that in unranked. And I did that in a game where I was like by far the highest MMR, and I just walked over everybody, and it was great. But I learned a lot playing against the counter. If you're trying to improve at the game, there is some degree of value playing against counters. But if you're trying to climb MMR while still improving at the game, of course, I would definitely say, again, like Flubb was saying, pick intelligently. Don't just pick to your strengths, because sometimes your strengths are still weak. Right, if your strength is Spectre and the other team has three heroes that build Silver Edge, probably don't pick Spectre, right? Because you're just gonna get Silver Edge and murdered. So think through your picks, and it's fine to say, all right, of my core, like, all right, I'm trying to play carry and climb to the next 1,000 mark, and say, all right, I play Luna, Lone Druid, Safe Lane, and Troll Warlord. And all three of these are pretty snowbally pushing safe lane cores. You've kind of wormed yourself into a hole there, right? Where it's like, okay, well, they picked a Coddle and a bunch of Wave Clear and a Broodmother, and none of the carries that I play can deal with any of those three things. So I'm just screwed, right? So you don't want to put yourself in that position. So definitely expand your horizons, but it is important, obviously, contextually, to say, all right, I am just statistically way better at PA than I am at any other carry, let's say, right? That's important to know, and it's important to think that through then in the pick screen and say, all right, they don't have any counters to PA, but they also don't have any counters to PL. And yeah, sure, I could pick PL, but I also could pick PA. And then having that information to back you up and say, all right, I picked PA instead of PL in this situation. All right. So it's important contextually, and it's important to educate your hero picks and your decisions, and even item choices, etc. If you realize you're winning a lot with PA builds that are like Deso rushes, and you're losing a lot when you try to do greedier builds that maybe have a Battle Fury, that's important. But don't live and die by stats, but use them to educate all your decisions.
All right, so on that note, I'm going to give everybody the standard minute wrap-up, and since we're all sitting here quietly in the background, who should I let go first today? Because there's going to be a lot of argument between Ursi and Flubb today. So
I actually have a complete sidebar that I'm not even going to argue with Flubb.
Oh, okay. So well, then Ursi, we'll let you go first.
Okay, so I actually didn't think about bringing this up until now, but by far my favorite function on Dotabuff, especially when I'm playing heroes that I'm new to, or even heroes that I play a ton, is going to the hero and you click guides. It's the second option, and it shows you guides just in order of high MMR players and like verified pro players and stuff. And that is by far the most educational thing on Dotabuff, because it shows you each respective team, right? So if I go to Lena, I can see, all right, starting items, then exact timings for all those items, and you can try to match that up with your own timings, or say, oh, well, I got Yule's at 13 minutes and the average when I'm looking at these guides is 1450. It's like, okay, well, then I'm doing great this game. Or vice versa, right? I got it at 18 and he got it at 14. I must be doing something wrong. So, and also it shows you full skill builds, and you'll see, these games where it's like, all right, he went Shadowblade. Why did he go Shadowblade against this team? And you look and you see like, oh, great. Like they don't have escapes. They have a lot of like low pickoff potential heroes, and they don't have anybody that reveals invis, right? Like that kind of stuff is really valuable. So I prefer that to anything else when it comes to Dotabuff. Is every time I pick a hero, it also helps to have a second monitor. I will say it's like a godsend. Every time I pick a hero, especially in Captain's Mode when I have time, I pull up their thing on Dotabuff, I look at like the highest MMR players recently, and then I see one that is within my wheelhouse, my comfort zone item-wise, and skill build wise, and I go for that. And it shows you the lane they're in. If you're playing a hero like PA that sometimes is mid and sometimes is safe, all the builds say mid lane, safe lane, mid lane, safe lane. So you can just ignore all the ones for the different thing. So definitely check that out. 1,000%.
All right, Flubb, what you got for us with your last minute?
Yeah, totally. Real quick to add on to that. Yeah, the second monitor is a godsend. Totally get that. If you have the availability and money to get a second monitor, it will improve your game. I guarantee it. Anyway, the whole thing with innovation. If you picked up freaking the Echo Saber, like that's just a bad move in general. Like you can't like compare like bad innovation to good innovation. You're just like
both are innovation.
Okay, but like you can do the wrong thing or the right thing, and like it's good to like test the waters or whatever. You could make that argument, but if something is like obviously not going to work, there's certain builds that I will not go into right now that I do not like, and I hate when people like say that it has to go down this way because of I've tested it out and it's worked this way, and I don't understand how that worked that way, because like scientifically, like if you think about every aspect from the game, it should not work better than it shouldn't work better. Like it's not going to work better because you just say it will. But like the only idea that works with is like that you will get 2 hits in to lessen their mana more. It's not really helping out your damage. It's not helping out your farming potential that much. It's not helping out like any good aspect of the hero. Then that's a shit item, and like don't think that way. But like if you're going into a situation,
we're gonna connect you with that we're gonna connect you with that anti-mage from that game so that you can let him know.
Yeah, so I can let him know, hey, don't do dumb stuff and bring my arguments down because you're doing it dumbly.
Don't innovate badly. Flubb only wants you to innovate if you do it in a cool way.
Don't worry, I yelled at him.
If you think about it, then it's fine. But Don't just be like, yes, this one thing works, and this is the why I do it. It's like, God.
All right, so for my soapbox, I'm gonna defend something that was said on the Monday show that was brought to my attention that I would have instantly assumed. We live in a world where Io is a strength hero and fucking Ursa is an agi hero. Here are Ursa's starting attributes: 23 strength, 18 agi, 16 int. If I were just to give you the hero's starting attributes, you would guess that he were a strength hero. If I were to tell you which stats gained the most, you would guess that he's a strength hero with a 2.7 strength gain to a 2.1 agi gain. That is absurdity.
Thank you.
Actually, those are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I didn't think it was so ridiculous to think he was a strength hero.
Yeah, it's not ridiculous.
So you guys didn't play back then, I take it, but those stats and those stat growths are vestiges of the old Ursa.
Yep.
That's why those are like that. Because Ursa used to, while being an agi hero, his ults used to give him damage predicated on his amount of HP. So he was a hero that had a ton of strength because his damage was based on his strength. So that's why his strength gain is very high, and that's why his base strength is high.
Doesn't strength give you HP?
Yeah, that's my point.
That's his point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just in the background, like, hey, fuck you.
Like,
I haven't got that going.
They didn't want to like quadruple the damage. That was what was going on, and they wanted to have like a way to go into both agility and strength, so that you would get attack speed, or you could get like extra damage. And like you could kind of get extra damage by going agility, but it really wouldn't help out like your ultimate. So it was like two different like styles of skill builds that you could go, and it was with the changes to like what basis of heroes are, like certain things kind of like come in the wayside like that over time. Now Io actually, in my opinion, makes sense because they
Flubb.
like
nope.
He's
kind
a
of
strong
does, man.
boy.
Yeah, like I mean, obviously it doesn't make sense with a hero. But
No. There we go.
Like with the ball of energy, like yeah, that's not like big hardy strength guy.
Yeah,
But,
no, that's
like-
when I look at Io, man, all I think is I Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's what pops into my brain every time I look at see an Io in lane. That's what I
But
go
like,
to.
think of all the strength ranged heroes. Like, it makes me excited that they made a strength ranged hero besides Huskar, because Huskar is. I mean, everyone hates on Huskar. I like him a little bit, but everyone hates on Huskar. And if you're gonna hate on the only other ranged hero that's strength, I mean, come on, man. You know
what? I am for logical. I am for logical attribute allocation. That is what I'm going to run on in 2020.
Wind Ranger to Agi, then.
Wind Ranger to Agi.
Yeah.
TA to whatever she's wrong.
is Agi.
Yeah,
She
okay,
is
she's
Agi.
fine.
She
Well,
should
somebody's
be Agi.
wrong.
It's Wind Ranger Io.
Yeah. Wind
So,
Ranger
do you have a problem with Venge then being Agi?
No, not really. I mean, you know, she could
Man,
go
I
either
go
way,
with
as long as she's not
See,
strength.
like she's intelligence, man. Like that's the one that's the weirdest to me. Like, I know there's like the idea of Venge carry still, but
Dude,
like,
it's good.
really?
We used to run that as a
It takes
team.
a ton of
I
Agi
know,
to swap
but
them,
like really
you know?
like the way that if you're talking about making sense, like a intelligent like spirit lady, it's intelligence.
So, oh god, I don't want to get off on like a big tangent, but there was like a MOBA that came out, like one of those ones that like failed after a few months, that every hero you could basically choose its starting stats, which branched into different builds. So it was actually a pretty interesting mechanic. I don't remember the name of the game. It was some generic like one word name that was like Glory or
Vainglory?
No, it wasn't Vainglory.
Oh, okay.
But like that's what I think of when you guys are talking about like Venge. Like, oh, you'd pick at the beginning of the starting screen, like, all right, do you want the support into Venge or the carry semi-core agi Venge? Also, like by this logic, like right, like Nyx should probably be intelligence, and like Viper should just not be a hero.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, you can't think about it too hard. You just gotta like
Yeah.
let it be a
Yeah.
thing, and then
Yeah, you just gotta accept it. Like 2016.
Fine. All right. I'm accepting. I'm accepting it. All right. That's going to be it for us, folks. If you guys want to find us, we're at defenseofthepatients.com. You can also find us on Twitter at .p_show and go to the go to the Patreon. Scope out the rewards there. The $20 replay analyses are super popular. We're working on filling those now. I think I've got like three or four of them. We only have like a couple left, I think, that we've got to connect with the people to find the games they want replay analyses done for. Ursi's going to get started on those. I know Flubb's going to work at least one of them. Proud's going to do somebody's jug build. So it's fun. It's going to be cool. It's a great way to, have Ursi, Proud, Flubb maybe help you on an individual basis to learn a hero a little bit better. Or if you just want to master the jungle with the king of the jungle himself, you could just send it in and do it that way. That's an option.
Don't forget that replays expire in 10 days. So
Yes.
and that's fine. If you download your own replay, you have the DEM file on your computer, email that to us when Cyphus gets in contact with you. And then that's fine. Like, you could have a replay from like 2015. I don't care. But
And this is how Cyphus got a virus, by the way. No.
well, yeah. But so keep that in mind if you are sending us replays to do. That, because I know it's disappointing, but I know we already had one replay that like is just inaccessible. So
Yeah, unfortunately.
10 days apparently is the expiration.
So let's see. We can also find us on twitch.tv/.ptv, where the ham practices get streamed. Roland streams his shenanigans, his tryhard shenanigans of late. You also have, the occasional pop in for me when I party up with Roland. We don't have the in-houses right now because we're on hiatus until after the first of the year. But if you do want to be prepped for the next round of in-houses, join us on discord.gg/.p, DOTP, and you can join up in the Discord, and that's how you get involved with the in-houses. YouTube.com/.ptv1 is where we'll be posting the replay analyses done by the show hosts. You can also find replay analyses done there by Fafnir. He's a community admin. You hit him up in the Discord. Hit him up on the subreddit for replay analyses in that regard. But if you want one of the show hosts, hit up the Patreon. Am I forgetting anything? iTunes, Stitcher, all the favorite podcast apps. That's it, right?
Subreddit r/defensivations
with Mr. J Gucci.
Twitter at Ursinity, at FlubbDota, 2Bs, at DotP_show.
Yep.
I also think that Grouty is like doing something special on like I know it's off right now, but he's like doing like reverse captain's mode or something crazy like that on the weeks that since we're off. He's like doing like basically Dota Olympics with like Wyverix or something. I don't know. It's something silly's going on Wednesdays.
If Grudy's involved, I'm sure it's Dota Special Olympics. I kid, Grudy. I kid.
Don't make fun of the Special Olympics like that.
I wouldn't. I'm sorry. It was low hanging fruit. It was so easy. I had to go for it. Just like Grudy. So easy, I had to go for it. But anyway, yeah, I think that's going to be it for us. Leave us a review on iTunes. We love to read those, and we are still trying to catch up on all of them. I think that's it. Are you guys good?
I'm grand.
All right, send questions to defenseofthepatrons@gmail.com for the upcoming Tuesday show. Me and Proud will be joining Flubb next week. And even though it hasn't been recorded yet, I'm sure you've enjoyed the one that involved Ursi and Roland. So, yep, that's all we got today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, this is Cyphus for Flubb, for Ursi saying good luck.